Hello and welcome back to Healer Within. This is Amy Marone, your host and spiritual hypnotist. Today I have a very special guest, Joe Grumbine. He is the host of Healthy Living by Willow Creek Spring podcast. And he is also the founder of Gardens of Hope, located in Southern California. Joe, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Oh, Amy, it's my pleasure. We're having such a great conversation. I was like, oh wow, aren't we supposed to be recording?
Exactly. I'm like, hold that thought, Joe. Hold that thought. I want you to share it. Joe, you have such a vast and fascinating background that even as I pondered where to begin in this podcast, I could start anywhere and it could
Sure.
lead us down the path to a wonderful conversation. But I think where I would like to start today is to have you share with our audience more about your background in plant medicine.
Oh, absolutely. I've been working with plants since I was a little kid. My grandmother taught me how to take cuttings when I was probably like 5 years old, and I was always fascinated by the ability to take one plant, make another plant out of it, and just, my dad, we had a little bit of property growing up, and I earned money by taking care of fruit trees and working in the garden, mowing the lawn and planting and taking care of our property. And it just sort of became part of my life. And when my first experience with plant medicine was probably about 1982.
Mhm.
And I was, well, no, that's not true. It was earlier than that. I think I was probably in seventh grade when I tried cannabis for the first time. And I had a friend, we were like Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, back in the old
Yeah.
days. And we explored and tried things. And just, he was a little more adventurous than I was, but I
Mhm.
was always eager to jump in and try the things that he proposed. And so,
Mhm.
and I had plenty of that myself, but he was a little more aggressive than I was, which was kind of cool. It helped bring me out of, I was always kind of a introvert by nature, and
Mhm.
life has brought me out into the ability to share my experience with people. So I tried cannabis, like I said, I was probably in seventh grade, and I was always one of these hyper kids. I was always, they called me gifted. I learned to read when I was like 4 years old, and
Mhm.
I read and read and read and explored and wanted to learn everything I could learn. And this kind of helped me quiet down a little bit
Mhm.
and experience rather than always be on a mission.
Mhm.
I didn't consider it to be medicine. I just considered it to be fun, and it resonated with my spirit. Well, later on, a few years later, I planted my first cannabis seed and I grew my first plant.
Mhm.
And I connected with that spirit of that plant. Again, not realizing that that's what I was doing. It just was very interesting to me. Like I'd go out there every morning to watch the plant grow,
Yeah.
and I would put my energy to it in a way that I didn't with the other plants.
Mhm.
Fast forward a few years, probably 1985, um, I met a guy who taught me how to grow better.
Mhm.
He was a kind of an expert, one of the few mentors I've had in my life. And I became even more intrigued as I learned a little bit more about it, about how to grow it, different ways to grow it, and things that I could do. Fast forward a few more years, I think probably 1988, 89. I grew up with a lung condition. I had asthma and allergic bronchitis, and my dad was a doctor, so I went through all these allergy shots and testing and midnight trips to the emergency room and shots of
Mhm.
adrenaline and
Oh.
nebulizers, and it was pretty traumatic, and I never knew. All of a sudden, I wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, I couldn't breathe, and
Mm.
you know, it's pretty scary when you can't breathe. And so, um, but as I got older, I hated the medicine. I hated the pills, and they made me feel horrible, and I just never liked that. And I stumbled upon a book about natural medicine.
Hmm.
This is before computers, so there was no
Yeah.
internet.
Yeah,
There was
I
books.
remember.
Yeah, there was books, and
Yeah.
I stumbled upon this book, and I started reading it, and it was interesting about all these different plants that were medicinal, and it even had some formulas about making teas and tinctures and these different types of extracts. And I said, wow, that's interesting. And it inspired my little boy curiosity again. And I said, well, I guess I'm going to start a mission. So I started collecting seeds and plants, and I started
Wow.
growing them. And I said, well, let's see what this is all about. And I had a property, my first house. I had a decent little backyard, and I started growing this medicinal herb garden. And as the plant started to mature, I started to try some of these recipes.
Hmm.
And at the same time, I was growing and consuming cannabis and not really considering it medicine, but it was.
Yeah.
And over time, in talking to local friends and neighbors, I would talk about my little experience. I tried this tea and it seemed to help me with this thing. And I made this little alcohol tincture. I made this different extract and trying out these different formulas. And I keep finding out that, wow, that's kind of interesting. It seems to help. Well, more and
Uh-huh.
more people started going, well, I've got this problem. Maybe you can make something for me. And it just
Wow.
happened very organically. And I
Yeah.
didn't ever have any like, oh, I know this or that. I'm like,
Yeah.
sure, I'll try, let's
Yeah.
see what happens. And over time, um, I just got a little experience and started to be able to make more and more things. Started writing down, I journaled everything and all these different recipes. I started this recipe book, and I I was a commercial and industrial painter at the time, so I was working in all these different factories and buildings and traveling around to different jobs. Well, it turned out there was a used bookstore almost near everywhere that I was
Yep.
at. So I started
Uh-huh.
collecting all these herbal books and reading them. And then I started to realize that there's all this information that the more I knew, the less I knew.
Yeah.
And there's all these different points of view and different places that people studied herbs from. And so I came to a point where I had a considerable library, and when I went to go and research a formula, I would read a bunch of different books about it, and I would realize that not everybody agreed. All
Sure.
these different authors, and one would say, "Oh, this is the best herb for this," and the other one would say, "Nah, that's not that good." And I realized that there's all these different areas that these herbalists were from, and they had access to different plants and different knowledge.
Hmm.
And you don't necessarily are going to learn about this combination of plants if you live over here.
Yeah,
And
completely.
so
Yeah.
what I started doing was like, if I could get three or four herbalists to agree on a formula,
Hmm.
then I would consider it as viable.
Wow.
And
Uh-huh.
so I would have to read a lot to go and say, all right, I got one, I got another one, I got another one. All right,
Hmm.
I think this is worth exploring. So then I would, either have the herbs available or I would start to find sources of, all these different apothecaries that are out there. And I started
Hmm.
to explore some of the more earth-based religions and some of the herbs that were used for spiritual practices and
Hmm.
different things. And I started to become trained in some of those traditions. And I started learning more and more and more about all these different uses, mental, spiritual, and physical,
Yeah.
that these plants could be used for. And I found, wow, this is the more I did, the more I learned it works. And then along the way, I discovered that cannabis was medicinal, and I started to do extractions and make medicine with it. And so years into this, I had a friend who was a teacher. She was a nurse, but she also taught the continuing education units.
Hmm.
And she started bringing me in as a guest speaker to talk about, alternative healing. And I started being asked to teach workshops and classes. And I realized when I taught my first one that I learned the most when I was
Hmm.
teaching because I had to. I had to
Yes.
sharpen my
Yes.
pencil, I had to have the answers that these people were going to ask.
Yeah.
And so I started embracing the teaching path along the way. And then again, I was a curious mind, and I had friends who were also curious. And so we explored psychedelics. We went and explored mushrooms and
Hmm.
LSD even. And
Hmm.
I found I became what I called a tour guide.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
people would come to me and they'd never done these substances before. And I'd say, well, I can take you on a journey where you'll be safe. I recognize that, people could freak out or they could have a bad experience, but for some reason, I always stayed in a good way. Like it seemed to, again, I wasn't looking at it as medicine, but it was healing me.
Yeah. Well,
And
yeah, go ahead.
no,
I
no,
wanted to ask a question about that, but
yeah.
keep going. Yeah.
Well, and again, this is always like I'm never going around saying I'm this or I'm that. I'm
Yeah.
just living my life,
Yep.
I don't have any ambition to be famous or considered to be in regard of anything. I'm just a guy trying to do a good job in life, Meanwhile,
Yeah.
I've got, some young kids. I got a marriage that failed and went going through all my own, problems in life and overcoming that, meeting another woman along the way, and in spite of all my trepidation and never going to get married again, I
Yeah.
ended up marrying her and raising her two young children. And she was a widow, and we've been together for 30 years now.
Wow.
And and so, learning along the way, all these things. It was probably cannabis is the medicine I spent the most time with as I understood the 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 magnitude of the things that it could help with. And
Sure.
I started to, through these books and meeting people, learning about all the different things it could do. And I started making medicine out of it and extracting and making oil and discovered that it could help cancer patients. And the first lady that I made this stuff that was a tincture, and I would make it into a liqueur, and flavor it with these different fruits and things. And
Hmm.
again, I did it in my mind as an experiment, it
Hmm.
was a recreational thing that was powerful, but and I started realizing maybe it could help as a medicine. And I had a roommate at the time. I was in the separation phase of my first marriage, and
Hmm.
I had a roommate, and he had an aunt who was going through cancer. She was in her 70s, and she was going through chemo and I think radiation, but I know chemo for sure. And she couldn't sleep and she couldn't eat, and she was always nauseous and she was sick, and she was just really in a bad way. And that it wasn't necessarily the cancer that was hurting her so bad, but the treatments. And I said, maybe this can help. I don't know if it can help, but I don't think it would hurt her.
Hmm.
She was this, God-fearing woman, and she would never do drugs.
Yep.
But she had an open enough mind. I think what happens is we find ourselves in a very difficult place, and the conventional wisdom or treatments aren't working.
Yep.
And then your mind starts to open up to, well, maybe I would try something else. that maybe I wouldn't normally consider because I might think it was not good or whatever the reason. But I'm in such suffering or I'm in such misery or I'm afraid of what's going to happen next that I'm willing to try something. And
Sure.
I
Yeah.
think she was in that spot. So she tried my tincture. And after a couple of months, I kept giving it to her. And yeah, I didn't charge her anything for it. I just said,
Hmm.
try it out, see if it helps you. And I remember she sent me a card
Hmm.
through my roommate and he gave it to me and it was just wow. Phew. I could still get emotional thinking about it. And she just
Yeah.
said, you've changed my life. You've given me hope and I pray for you every day and I thank you for
Mm.
what you've given me. I can sleep now, I can eat,
Yes.
and it's a miracle what you've given to me. And I was like, whoa, you know,
Yeah.
I
Game changer.
realized that there's
Right.
something here, and
Yeah.
that was kind of the beginning of my real plant medicine journey where I realized that I was onto something, and
Hmm.
that's kind of the beginning of it all.
Wow. And it just came from such a pure,
Yeah,
authentic place within you, right? There's no end game here except to help others.
yeah, just, exploring and learning and I wanted to help myself first and
Yeah.
and make medicine that would help my lungs
Yes.
because I didn't want to take this stuff. So that's kind of was the original seed for it.
Sure.
But it was also just, my curious journey
Yep.
and I always wanted to be a good person,
Uh-huh.
I wasn't always a good person, but I always wanted to be. And
Sure.
so if I found a way I could help somebody, I would always, consider it.
Sure. It was like you played this informal medicine man of your community, which is such a beautiful story. Boy, you and I have to do some past life regression.
Yeah, for sure.
So
For
I'm
sure.
very curious about the origin of your soul. But,
Yeah.
you know, one therapist said to me a long time ago, let your mess be your mission. And that really, really resonated with me. It's like at first in our early beginnings, we stumble upon something, a tool, a modality, a resource, and we are the guinea pig. We
Oh yeah.
try it on ourselves,
Right,
and
right. Always. Yeah.
then it reaches a point where it's too good not to share.
Right.
You are so you become this might be a strong word, but the evangelist of whatever
Yeah.
it is
Well,
that you
what happens is
discover.
is like you learn something and you get excited because it
Yeah.
works. And you're
Yeah.
like, you hear about somebody that you're like, oh, I know something that could help you. And I want
Yes.
to share that with you. And I'm so excited. And Amy, this thinking about it, it actually goes back further than that. When I grew up, I was raised Catholic and I got a
Mhm.
Italian family and
Yep.
everybody's Catholic. And I,
Yep.
went through the training. I was an altar boy and went through the
Yep. I know the drill.
catechism school and,
Yep.
went to Catholic school for some of my educational journey and, was taught the Bible and all this. But at one point, I came upon that story of Solomon
Mm-hmm.
and where God came to Solomon and said, you're ordained and I want to give you a gift and you can have any gift you want. And
Mm-hmm.
Solomon had the insight to say, I want wisdom.
Mm.
And God blessed him in so many ways. And also, he was still human. He made his mistakes and all the things that happened through it. But that story struck me as, wow, that guy got it.
Yeah.
At 10 years old, I'm just a
Yeah.
kid, but I was struck with that. And I began to pray for wisdom
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
10 years old.
Wow.
And what I learned throughout my life, it was only recently that I said, okay, enough of this wisdom stuff. Because
Right.
wisdom comes with hard knocks.
Yes. Oh, isn't
And
that the truth?
I,
Uh-huh.
I kept finding myself in precarious spots, and then I'd find my way out of it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
after a while, I'm like, oh, this is that wisdom. And I'm like,
Yes.
all right, maybe I can take that and help somebody else with it now. I can pass on the wisdom after I got diagnosed with cancer. I'm like, all right,
Oh,
enough of this stuff. Let's get on to another chapter.
exactly. I mean, necessity is the mother of wisdom.
Right.
And you touched upon something, and I absolutely want to circle back around and talk about your current health storm and some
Sure.
aha moments and epiphanies, because that's a fascinating piece of your of
Oh yeah.
our story here today. But the other thing I'm very, very curious about, you and I touched on this before we hit the record button, the use of plant medicine in sacred ceremony.
Yeah.
You had a very interesting story of working with the Native American community
Yeah.
and to help you release some, I'll just call them, emotional, spiritual inner stirrings.
Right, right.
And I would love if you would share with our listeners more about that story.
Yeah. Well, let me take you to the genesis of all this. And through all of this, like I said, I used mushrooms off and on. I still use mushrooms occasionally,
Mhm.
and now more ceremonial than ever. But before, it was always like it gives you a big smile for the whole night, and
Yeah,
you just like you're smiling. I'm like, how could that be bad,
yeah.
And I learned to make DMT out of a plant root, and I explored that a little bit. I stopped doing LSD as a young kid because it takes a lot out of you,
Hmm.
and it's not originated from plants. It's synthesized and it's powerful, and I think it can have a lot of healing to it, but it always took more out of me than I was willing to give. And when I
Sure.
got into my 30s, I'm like, all right, enough of this. So I probably will never do LSD again, but I don't need to, I've
Sure.
experienced it. I got what I got out of it, and there are some medicines I do once, and I go, oh wow, that gave me what I needed. I don't need that anymore.
Yeah,
Um,
completely.
but I had a friend who was, I went through this whole thing with the cannabis where I had a battle with the government for 6 years. They locked me up and for
Oh,
helping people. Oh yeah, there's a whole chat, a
oh
whole
my goodness.
series.
That's another podcast, Joe.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And
Yeah.
I actually had another nonprofit I ran for 15 years called the Human Solution International. But
Uh-huh.
I went to battle for this, and I risked, you know, my freedom, my livelihood, my home,
Mhm.
everything because I knew what I was doing was helping people.
Yeah.
And there was a guy who was very supportive and visited me when I was locked up, and but he was always very manic and a little paranoid and always like chaotic energy. One day
Yeah.
he comes to my house and he's got this sense of calm about him. And I'm
Hmm.
like, Larry, what happened to you? You know? And
Yeah.
I was just like, it was palpable. Like, he was just like whatever that chaos that was in him had dispersed. And he was just this peaceful guy. He says, yeah, and you're not going to believe it. I just came back from Montana and I sat with these Indians in a teepee ceremony. And he said it was life-changing. And there were these ladies who came all the way from North Dakota to help with this ceremony for him. And he came to me because he wanted to get some products that we make to give to them as gifts. That was
Mhm.
his reason for coming. And he told me a little bit about this all night long ceremony. The same thing I was telling you we just did last weekend. And um, he took out this little film container. I don't know if you remember the old film canisters.
Oh,
They
yes.
little
Uh-huh.
plastic
I
containers. We'd
sure
use them for
do.
holding all kinds of things, right? Little
Yeah.
waterproof container. And it had this powder in it. And he said, if you want, it just had a little bit. He said, if you want to taste it and just see what I went through, he says, it probably won't affect you, but at least you'll get a taste. And all right. So I took a little pinch and I put it in my gum. And almost immediately, I felt a connection to all my cells and they like sparkled. I was like, whoa, that was like it just reached inside of me and said, I want to sit with you. And I'd never experienced anything like that before, like a
Uh-huh.
communication with a plant spirit like that.
Yeah.
And it was purely medicinal and spiritual. And I was like, whoa, that was incredible. And shortly after that, the medicine man, um, they call him a roadman. That's the term that they use. And the ceremony that they do is in the teepee is called a meeting.
Hmm.
And he said, this roadman that helped me, he said he's going through some financial problems and he has a teepee that he's looking to sell. And he said, and I was doing all right at the time.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that'd be cool, have a teepee as a decoration. I didn't think
Yeah.
about
Right.
it. And I says, well, how much does he want? And he told me, I says, yeah, I'll help the guy out. If he did this for you, I want to help this guy.
Yeah.
And that was my thought was, my friend Larry was transformed with this ceremony. I go, "Oh, whoever helped him, I want to help them."
Yeah.
And so I said, yeah, tell him I'll buy his teepee. And I had no idea what that meant, and then within a couple of weeks, he's like, well, he's going to bring it down and they want to do a meeting. And I'm like, whatever, I don't know what that means, but
Yeah.
okay. And again, I didn't have any fear or any reservation. I saw what it did for him, and I didn't know anything about peyote.
Yeah.
I never had an interest in learning about it. It was just I knew it was a plant drug, but I didn't know anything about it. I knew there was group of people that used it in their religion and their medicine, but that was all. I knew nothing about it, and
Hmm.
all of a sudden, it seemed like out of nowhere, this guy comes rolling in a pickup truck and he's got all these long, long poles on the top of his
Yeah.
truck. Oh, and then he told me, yeah, you got to buy the poles too to put it up. And so, all right, I gave him money for that. And this like crew of people comes in, and there's these two medicine men, roadmen, they call them. And next thing you know, we're putting this teepee up in my backyard, and it's huge. This thing's like 24 feet across, and
Right.
I'm like, I'm learning like really quick about all these things that are about to happen. And then my wife
Sure.
is got Native American in her, and she was like kind of afraid, and she's always the one that's overwhelmed by everything and afraid and doesn't want to do it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, come on, let's just try it.
Right.
And I said, you know what, you can come or not. It's not, I go, I'm going to go in. I feel called to do this. And then she just said, I'm connected to this. I think I want to do. And she sat with us in this ceremony, and it's all night long, and it's drumming and praying. And they have this drum that's called a water drum. It's an incredible instrument, and
Hmm.
it's like a wooden or a metal bowl, and they have these stones that they put around, and they tie the skin across it with a leather strap, and it's like they turn this bowl into a drum. And it
Wow.
has a little bit of charcoal from a ceremony that goes in it, and water goes in it, and the skin is wet, and you hit this thing with a certain stick, and it makes these incredible sounds. The vibration that comes out is just magical, and you can
Mm.
make all these different tones with it. And there's these
Mhm.
songs, they're teepee songs, and through the night they do this. There's a rattle that's part of it too. The person who sings the song is shaking this rattle, and the other guy is drumming, and there are four song sequences. And
Mm.
so you sing this one song, and then the drum shifts and it changes its tone, and then another song, and then the drum shifts and changes its tone, then another song, then another song, and that's like one set of songs. And
Oh.
it's a prayer. And you do this through the night with tobacco prayers, and water is a big part of it. And if you know about water, water has memory, and it is life. And you connect to the earth and the air and the fire. There's a fire in the teepee, and that's
Mm.
really your connection to Creator. The
Oh.
fire is, the middle of the earth is fire. The sun is fire. In our heart, our spirit is fire, and
Mhm.
it's really where divinity is. And you can sit with this fire and receive incredible connection and messages.
Mm,
And so after that all night meeting, I came out a different person.
yeah.
And I realized, wow, this is amazing, powerful medicine. We journeyed through that for several years, and these two roadmen would come in to our property, and people would come from around, from Mexico, from other states. They would all come down to our property, and we would have these meetings. But at COVID time, both of these roadmen died,
My.
and not related to each other. They both died within 6 months of each other. And I
Hmm.
was like, oh my God, I've lost my connection to this medicine. Like,
Mhm.
how do you go and find a new roadman? You don't
Yeah,
put an ad
completely.
on
Not easy.
Craigslist looking for a roadman. And so I was sad. I said, I don't know what to do. I don't know. I felt like this was going to be a part of my life, and then it went away. Well, fast forward to last year, um, my business, Willow Creek Springs, we make natural products and
Mhm.
use a lot of hemp-based ingredients, but all natural ingredients. I've been doing it for 25 years.
Mhm.
And we had grown our business to the point where we moved into an office, and we had a neighbor, Kevin, who worked with mushroom growing medium. And so they made this grain-based medium, and I was interested and curious. And a little whisper in my ear said, "Go be friends with this guy."
Mhm.
And I was like, "Well, that's weird. I'm an old guy. I don't care. I don't need any more friends. Like I never go out of my way to make friends with people. I just,
Yeah,
if somebody comes, it happens organically or it doesn't.
great.
But this little voice whispered in my ear, said, "Go be friends with this guy." I was like, "That's weird." And over time, he'd come over. I gave him some of our products. He found them helpful. We talked about doing some collaborative work,
Mhm.
and then one day, he came back or he was getting ready to leave, and I said, "Oh, where are you headed off to?" He said, "Oh, I'm going fishing." I go, "Oh, I love to fish." And I said, "Maybe one day we can go fishing together." Well, several months later, we went on a fishing trip
Mhm.
and was on a boat together for like 4 days, and we
Wow.
got to know each other. Yeah. And,
Wow. That's a way
and
to know somebody.
well, not only that, but there was a really traumatic experience. The cook died on the boat.
Oh
And
my goodness.
when he was going through a cardiac arrest, I was sleeping and he came and woke me up. He's like, Joe, get up. Maybe you can help this guy. He's going through a trauma." And I'm like, "Okay." And I went up, stumble up to the galley, and this guy's going through, he was like an 80-year-old guy, and we didn't realize it, but he had already had heart problems and diabetes. He was going out.
Hmm.
But through it all, that whole like, traumatic experience, we got to be close. Like you find closeness through difficulty.
Mm.
'Cause you find what people are really made of.
Mm.
And when something goes really wrong, like when I got arrested and locked up, most of the people I knew in my life, including family, just took off. They didn't want anything to do with me. But a handful of them came to me
Yeah.
and said, "Hey, we're here to help." I
Yeah.
call them like first responders. And
Oh, Soul Tribe.
when
Soul
I got
Tribe,
sick,
Joe.
the same
Yeah.
thing, I got diagnosed with cancer. Most people are like, "Whoo, I'm
Mhm.
out of here." But a handful of people are like, "Hey man, let's get to this. Let's solve this." And so
Completely.
you really find connection. So fast forward again, Kevin comes to me one day, he says, like, "I'd like to do an event at your place."
Mhm.
And I was like, "Well, we've done events at our property, but it's a lot of work." And my wife is like, "I don't want to do that anymore."
Yeah.
But I've something told me, go do this event. Like we're gonna build this. I was already in a mindset. I want to build this community. And he originally it was gonna be like a mushroom based thing. I said, "Well, why don't we make it health based instead of just mushroom based? And we can bring people from different modalities." And I was already doing the podcast, and I said, we can build the community through this. Well, one of the original guys that was helping to do it went sour on us, and it was just a drama and over nothing. And I was like, at first, Kevin was like, I don't know, maybe we shouldn't do it. I said, no, no, let's go forward. I feel like there's something just like that little whisper that said, go be his friend. It was like,
Yeah.
do this event.
Yep.
And I was like, all right. So Kevin had an idea of, well, let's bring people. We had all these speakers that were going to be coming from around the world,
Mm-hmm.
different healers, and they were going to do, presentations as part of the event. And we were having them come on to Instagram Live and do, like a little interview to say, hey, we're going to be here. This is the event. And this one lady, there was two people, Salvador and Florina Threehawk. They both came on, and I was like, she's talking about integration of plant medicine in preparation for ceremony. And I had never even like, I'm like, wow, that's deep. Like you really,
Yeah.
you get it. Like,
Yes. Yes.
and her presentation touched me in a way that I said, wow, I need to get to know her.
Yeah.
So I said, I'd love to have you on my podcast and maybe you could come out, see the property, and, maybe there's a way we can work together.
Mm-hmm.
So the plan was she was just going to come up and we were going to record a podcast episode, take some pictures for the event,
Mm-hmm.
and see what happened next. She shows up with Salvador and one of the other members of her collective, and it was like magic just happened.
Mm.
And she showed up at probably like 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And next thing you know, we're talking and sitting, and then they showed me rapé, which is a tobacco and
Mm-hmm.
herb-based snuff,
Mm-hmm.
and they um, gave me some, and they taught me
Mm-hmm.
about it, and it was my first experience with that, and it
Mm-hmm.
was like, whoa, you guys are amazing. Like I have a whole history with tobacco, and I was already done with tobacco, and
Mm-hmm.
I came to accept it as a sacred tool with deep
Mm.
respect and reverence rather than just this thing I did.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that was amazing. And ultimately, my wife made this beautiful meal. We sat down and shared a meal. And at the time, I had this lump sticking out of my neck, but I was not diagnosed.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know that what I had was cancer. In fact, I had a doctor that said it's probably not cancer. And so, but I knew it wasn't getting any smaller, and I knew that there was something I had to deal with. Next thing I know, it's 9 o'clock at night. We had not recorded anything. We didn't take any pictures. All we did was talk and
Mm-hmm.
just get to know each other. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. Well, at the very same time, I was working with a number of other facilitators, and one of them had talked about combo, which is a frog-based medicine. It's a frog poison, basically.
Yeah. Yes.
And what they do with it is you sit in a ceremony, and then they take a little stick and they burn little dots in you. And then
Yes.
they take this medicine and they rub it in the burn, and then it goes into you that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I was already planning on doing it with this one facilitator. But then after this meeting with Florena and Salvador, she came to me the next week and said, I would like to do an ayahuasca ceremony at your place just for a few people, and they're coming from a long way off. But I said, well, that would be beautiful. I'd like to, see if we are a good match. It seems like we are, but you don't know until you try.
Yeah.
And so I agreed. I go, well, come on out. You can just use the place, and we'll just see how it goes. And she came out, and she turned out she was going to be serving somebody else combo that morning. And she said, if you'd like to sit with combo, I will serve it to you. And I said, whoa. I said, I was already going to do it with this other person, but I would love to do it with you. So
Mm-hmm.
we created this little beautiful place on the side of my stream, a little beach,
Mm.
and my wife and I both sat with this. And it's incredible because like when something comes to me that way, I don't fear it. I don't have any reservation. I go, well, there's something divine about this coming to me like this, and I'm not gonna question it, and I'm gonna give it a chance to help me. And we sat with this medicine, and it was a beautiful ceremony. Like I could tell just the care and reverence and deep understanding both of them had with this medicine that I was fully trusting and, perfect love and perfect trust.
Mm-hmm.
And I had nothing that was like in my way. So I was
Mm-hmm.
able to completely let go, and the medicine came into me, and it was like, whoa, all of a sudden I got hot. My whole body got really hot. I was sweating. And then the next thing you know, you're purging and purging. And you prepared for it though. You were on a water fast for, 24 hours before.
Oh,
So you
okay.
didn't have any food in you, you're cleansing your body to receive this medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And we had done that correctly. And so you feel this medicine literally like going through all your body. It goes into your head,
Mm-hmm.
it goes down into your arms, and then into
Mm-hmm.
your chest, and into your organs, down into your legs, down into your feet, and just you can feel it like scanning you. And
Wow,
and then
incredible.
after you're done, it's not a very long process, maybe 20, 30 minutes, and then she takes the medicine off and you sit in the creek a little bit and you finish the ceremony and you integrate. And afterwards, she did some energy work with me
Mm-hmm.
and literally like opened me up my heart
Mm-hmm.
and got me to recognize, my inner self and the need that I had to really love myself in a way that I thought I did, but I
Mm-hmm.
hadn't. And
Yeah.
next thing I know, I'm weeping in front of all
Oh,
these people I didn't even know. And
powerful.
I was just weeping. And I was like, whoa, I don't know what we just did here, but it was big.
Mm-hmm.
And subsequently, in the next couple of days, I had this overwhelming desire to just get rid of all these things. And I had objects, I had even some plant medicine that I wasn't really working with anymore that was connected to people that were negative in my life, uh,
Mm-hmm.
relationships that I was holding up and making excuses for. I
Yep.
was just like, let it all go.
Yep.
And that's what the medicine does for you. And that
Mm-hmm.
began a path that, so this was like back last September. So it's been about a year and a half that I've been on this big journey. In October, I get diagnosed with cancer. I find out that Florina and Salvador also work with peyote,
Mm.
but it's a different ceremony. It's an outdoor ceremony, not in a teepee. And I said, "Wow, okay, let's try it. The medicine wants to come back, so let's try it." And subsequently, we've sat with this medicine a dozen times or more, and then another medicine man comes to us, and he has the natives teepee ceremony. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, "Oh, the teepee's back," and I still have my poles. And so we've been doing this ceremony, and then another medicine man comes, and he works with another medicine called wachuma. It's a different cactus, and bufo, which is a toad medicine. And that was another just powerful experience that I shared. And through this, I've been able to, from the time I got diagnosed in October till now, walk through a number of ceremonies with the intent and purpose of learning what to do and then getting discernment and clarity and strength. And each time was a different focus of
Mm-hmm.
I need a different thing. Okay, at first it was like I need to understand the problem. And so
Yeah.
then I get all this information came flooding to me from all these sources. And then I'm like, well, I need to sift through this and figure out what applies to me. And then all of a sudden, one thing shines and another thing shines and another thing shines. And these other ones were like, it's not for you. And so I start going down this. And then I needed discernment. Like you can only do so many things at once.
Oh, isn't
And
that true?
then all of a sudden I get, that's when Dr. Hoffman came to me and out of just through my research and I meet this guy and next thing I know, yeah, I'll help you. And he comes on my podcast now regularly. And I learned about this diet and these practices and this community of people that are healing themselves. And it's all just been like in September when I began to get rid of all these things, I
Mhm.
cleared out, I'd say 60% of my life. Like I just said,
Mhm.
all these things that I thought were important, even my other nonprofit, I let it go. I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I have to
Yeah,
focus on this. It's taking too much. And I didn't have the support anymore. People weren't, cannabis got legalized and people are like, it's not a big deal anymore. And they
right,
didn't get it, that it's still a problem, but I couldn't take on everything in the world.
right.
So I just let all these things go. And it was like magic. Like within days of letting this stuff go, these beautiful, I call them unicorns, these
Yeah,
beautiful unicorns just start coming in like one after another. It was just kind of
yeah.
wild.
Divine timing.
Oh my God. And offering assistance and help and this new nonprofit starts taking off and then I get diagnosed. I'm like, I got all these programs going and I'm like, I don't know what to do and had to let some of them go for a while.
Yeah.
I was working on this, but through all this, I came up with a series of therapies that put together healed me. And I have you saw a picture of me when I had this
Mhm.
giant tumor. It was
Mhm.
really, I was a monster and I couldn't go anywhere because I was like a freak show. People just would be like staring at me because I literally had this giant monster sticking out of my neck.
Mhm.
And without surgery, without radiation, with some chemotherapy and all of these other treatments I was doing and these plant medicines, it's gone.
Wow.
And I'm getting ready to get a final scan to figure out, determine that it's gone. Then I'm gonna go to Japan where they have a really accurate scanner, and
Mhm.
it is science that we don't even have here in the United States, but it will definitively tell me that my cancer is gone, and or I still have some work to do. And either way, I'll know.
It's it's an incredible journey you've been on, Joe. As I mentioned, even before I hit the record button, I know that you and I are going to have many conversations.
Yeah, we're
And
already blasted through this
oh,
45 minutes
oh,
and like
exactly. And I have
we
so
barely scratched
many,
the surface.
exactly. And I have so many questions for you, but I'm going to put a teaser in here because I already know where we need to go for our next podcast, part
Beautiful.
two. And I know there's going to be many parts.
I
Where
love
I
it.
would love to pick up in our next podcast interview is I would love for you to share in greater depth your protocol for fasting,
Oh yeah.
the elimination of a particular amino acid
Yep.
that is found in meat, if
Yes.
I
All
am not
protein.
mistaken.
Yeah. All protein.
And I know that you had a recent interview where True North was mentioned,
Uh-huh.
the facility that does water fasting. I'm familiar with it because a, a hypnosis client of mine used it to shrink a tumor on her parathyroid.
Huh?
But I really and I'm fascinated about this technology in Japan.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so I want to do an entire podcast
I
about
love that.
Western medicine and
Yeah.
alternative medicine protocols for cancer. And I
Yeah.
want to dig in deeper on your particular kind of cancer.
Absolutely.
And in closing today, and I know this is more of a mind bending question, but I want to leave our clients with something of a spiritual nature. Joe, if I were to ask you in closing, what is your soul here to learn in this lifetime?
Well, it's wild. Before I did this Bufo ceremony, I got I got a message in my heart, and it said, "What are you willing to do for this?"
Mm,
And I was like, "Whoa!" That was before I
yeah.
even was served the medicine. And then in that process of the medicine, I left my body and I went up to this
Mm,
room of light, and I was talking to what I think was my creator, and
mhm,
I was signing a contract.
mm,
And I came out of it and I was shown my whole journey of this problem coming into my life and then my whole healing, and that I just needed to do the work, and I was healed. I was healed already in the spiritual realm, which is where it matters.
oh my
And
goodness,
I
yes.
just needed to walk the walk. But my contract was that I'm giving my life to help people.
Mm,
And it's not that like what I learn is you need to do what I did. It's
mhm,
I can teach you how to find your answer. Your problem
yeah,
is unique to you.
yeah,
And I'll never understand your problem the way you do, but that's not my job.
yeah.
I can teach you how to connect with source and how to find the place to find answers.
Mm,
A lot of it has to do with your desire to live your purpose
yeah,
and to find and have a purpose and to live. Like I
yeah,
have this amazing, I love life. Like I love every bit of it, even if
yeah.
it's hard. I love it. And so what was driving me was I want to continue living. But I came to a place in this where I saw darkness coming to me, and I actually had to accept that maybe I wasn't going to live anymore.
Mhm,
I came to a place where I talked to God. I said, I feel like you might be wanting to take me right now, but I don't think you do. And I said, but if you do, I'm all right. I feel like, I did what I could do and I don't
yeah,
have any regrets. But if there's a way for me to keep going, I'd rather choose that. And
yeah.
shortly after that, I felt my light starting to grow again.
Mhm,
And so in I guess a kind of long answer, I really think that my purpose and my calling through all of this is to help people to find their answers and
mm.
to show through my actions what's possible.
Oh,
And what's possible, the human experience is miraculous. And we have two things that we're given as gifts just by being human. And one of them, and there's a lot more than two probably, but these two in particular, we have the ability to every day start all over.
yeah,
Say, okay, today I'm going to be a new person. Like we
yeah,
have the ability to begin again every day. And we also have the ability to endure anything and to carry on through any adversity.
yep.
And so I feel that I've been given the gift to demonstrate that. And I have people tell me all the time how, and I don't go around preaching anybody anything.
Mhm,
I'm not here to tell you how to find your connection to God. I just go, I found it this way and you can find it. It's
mhm.
there. And
Yeah,
go look for it. That's where you
yep,
start.
yep.
And I have people tell me all the time that, wow, you inspire me. Like
Mhm,
I watched your story. I heard something you said, and you really give me the inspiration to go forward. And I think that that's somehow a big part of what this is all about. So
mm.
I,
Joe, I love
whenever I
it.
can,
Yeah,
yeah.
I love your story, your openness. I personally would love to do an internship at your
I love it.
organization and just shadow you for
I,
a year. I'm convinced that some of your plant medicine can help me with two rare conditions that I have.
I'm sure it
Um,
could.
I mean, absolutely. Joe, how in closing, how do people find you on YouTube, on your website, through email? How do people find
So
you?
I'm pretty prolific out there. I've got an Instagram. The Gardens of Hope is really one of the easiest ways. The gardensofhope.org is a website. Instagram, The Gardens of Hope. YouTube, The Gardens of Hope.
Mhm.
I also have a personal channel, Joe Grumbine, that goes back into the history of my battle with the government. The podcast is also featured there.
Mhm.
Healthy Living by Willow Creek Springs. It's on all the major platforms. The podcast, there's over almost 300 episodes now and
Incredible.
over 100 guests. And I do a lot of solo um, episodes. And I, I, my personal emails out there in all of these things. Very reachable.
Mhm.
I'm here to help.
Joe, it's amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today on my Healer Within podcast. I cannot wait for our future conversations. And again, thank you for being so generous with your time and your spirit and your story. Have a great day.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I've got to jump over to another interview. So
Absolutely.
this has been amazing. Let's do it again soon.
Sounds great.
All right. Take care
Okay.
now.